Well, last night, Sunday night, the Democrats in Texas, in the Texas legislature, finally found their spines, their ability to resist these Christian fascists. And they staged a dramatic late-night walkout last night to force the failure of that Christian fascist overhaul of state election laws that I've been talking about. What those dirty son of a bitches in Texas, the Christians, were trying to do. The Democrats at the last minute finally woke the fuck up and walked out. And by doing that, that deprived the legislative session of the minimum number of lawmakers required for a vote before the midnight deadline. And as of midnight, I guess according to Texas law, that session of the Texas legislature expired. Ta-da! And it was quite a setback for these state Christian fascists who had made a new voting law one of their top priorities to deprive people of color and young people of the right to vote, because those son of a bitches just won't consistently vote Christian fascist. So let's eliminate their ability to vote. Now, this effort is not entirely dead, however. This sick, fucked up governor, this Christian fascist jerk, Governor Greg Abbott, indicated that, okay, I'm going to call a special session of the legislature, which could start as early as tomorrow, to restart the whole process. And this pig Abbott said he strongly supported the election bill. And in a statement, he called the failure to come to an agreement last night, quote, deeply disappointing, end quote. And of course, it was a foregone conclusion that this Christian fascist prick would have signed anything that the Republicans passed, or the Christian fascists in the legislature, anything they passed. The dumb shit Abbott said on Twitter last night, quote, election integrity and bail reform were emergency items for this legislative session. They will be added to the special session agenda, end quote. Now, the bail reform bullshit was going to, I believe, was going to take away the right of people to post bail to get out of jail while they're awaiting trial. Jesus Christ. Now, it is a foregone conclusion, of course, that the Christian fascists would still be favored to get a bill passed in a special session. But what happened last night, according to the New York Times, presents a new hurdle in the Christian fascist push to get past this bullshit election law garbage that would install some of the most rigid voting restrictions in the country and turn Texas into a state with one of the hardest states to cast a ballot. Jesus Christ. Now, the final bill, it was known as SB 7, included, let me run this down again, new restrictions on absentee voting. It granted broad new autonomy and authority to partisan poll watchers. Those are the people who could show up with semi-automatic weapons in their hands in black polling precincts or precincts where people of color were predominant and intimidate the shit out of people. Texas was trying to make that the law, that they could do that. It also, this bill, escalated punishments for mistakes or offenses by election officials. I mean, prison time. It banned both drive-through voting and 24-hour voting, which were used for the first time during the 2020 election in Harris County, which is Houston, and by a growing number of the state's Democratic voters. The law was more involved in that. You'd have to read it. You can find it online, what these Christian fascist bastards were trying to do in Texas, and almost got away with it. And of course, they're going to try it again because the putrid governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, is going to call a special session so the white racists can do it again. Now, the inability of these Christian fascists to pass this last night was the first fuck up for the Christian fascists in its drive across the country. It's been going on for months to blow up the ability of people who are citizens of this country to vote. And not that I give a shit about this, but the Times says it's an embarrassment for GOP leaders in the Texas legislature, who at least momentarily fell short of a top legislative goal for both the prickish little governor, Greg Abbott, and the Christian Fascist Party. That was one of their top legislative goals, not restoring the infrastructure of Texas, not working on any sort of measure that you would think a legislature would focus on, whether it is old people or young people or education or health care. No. Let's just fuck up the ability of people to vote. That's all we care about. Because we are racist son of a bitches, and we know we're losing our political clout, and we want to do something to keep these fucking coloreds from voting. Oh, my goodness. So what happened after a big debate in the State House of Representatives? See, this had already passed the State Senate, but it came back to the State House of Representatives. And during that debate, the Democrats raised all sorts of hell. They staged lengthy question and answer sessions, and they put into play lengthy procedural maneuvers to try to stop this from happening. But then Democrats departed as a group, leaving the chamber roughly 14 members short of the required 100-member quorum to continue business. So without the requisite number of legislators, without that quorum, the Speaker of the State House adjourned the session around 11 p.m. last night, Texas time, effectively killing this filthy goddamn bill for this session. And the Democrats leaving was started by State Representative Chris Turner, the party's caucus chair in the House, who sent a text message to members at about 10:35 p.m. Texas time last night. And it said, quote, "Members, take your key and leave the chamber discreetly. Do not go to the gallery. Leave the building," end quote. And in a statement early today, Monday, Mr. Turner said the walkout had been a last resort. He said, Mr. Turner, the Democratic Party's caucus chair, he said, quote, "It became obvious Republicans were going to cut off debate to ram through their vote suppression legislation. And at that point, we had no choice but to take extraordinary measures to protect our constituents and their right to vote." Amen. And then early this morning, the filthy, putrid governor of Texas, or the lieutenant governor, Dan Patrick, also a Christian fascist, lashed out at his House colleagues and indirectly criticized Republican leadership in the House, saying in a statement that the Republican leadership had, quote, "failed the people of Texas tonight, no excuse." Now, isn't Dan Patrick, isn't he the one that's under indictment for fraud? I think he is. But he's been under indictment for what, 7 years now? So if Greg Abbott, the putrid governor of Texas, calls a special session, Republican legislatures are going to have to start from scratch. But with the whole thing, the whole procedural process of getting a vote up or getting a bill up for a vote. But it is possible they could simply use the same language and the provisions from that SB 7, or even introduce a bill with more stringent restrictions on voting access, which is probably what the son of a bitches are going to do. So it continues. Memorial Day, 2021. And last night, the Christian fascists in Texas were trying to take away from people the right to vote that, in theory anyway, so many Americans have given their lives to secure. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.